Good evening. Good evening. Paging Matthew Naythons. Paging Matthew Naythons. Come up here and sit down, please. So we're really pleased to have you all join us tonight and help launch photographer Matthew Naythons' book, Light in Dark Places, and his exhibition, which is out in the hallway on both sides. I hope you all had a chance to look at it. Of course, his book is for sale, right? Buy it. Important to support photographers. Yes, a couple people. If you do that a lot, you're going to get big muscles. It's a pretty heavy book. So it has two purposes. One, all the great photographs, but then you can exercise with it. I wanted to thank a few key people who have made these events possible. A big thank to Brian Brooks at Underdog Film Labs in West Oakland. He's printed all the shows for us in the last couple of years, which these shows are very expensive to print, and he's just donated his work and printing to us, which is really, really wonderful. Also a shout out to Leah Swindle. Leah, stop. Leah's our amazing staff member, events coordinator, and she does lots of other stuff. And without her, these events would not happen, I can tell you. So Leah, thank you so much. These events also would not be possible with the support of John Logan and his parents, Reva and David, who are no longer with us, but their name is up in the gallery, and their gift to us was transformed really the photo program here at the Journalism School. They made significant financial donations. They allowed us to hold a biennial photo book symposium, which many of you have attended. Last year we had over 300 people attend the book symposium. It was really incredible and a lot of fun. We publish a yearly student magazine called Realize, and a lot of the students are here tonight because I gave them an assignment. They had to come. I'm learning. The show of Matthews, of course, is supported by their grant. There's a chair in photojournalism that I hold, thankfully. And the room we're sitting in right now, we call it the LMC. By most of us, we say it's in the LMC, but it's known as the Logan Media Center. And this was funded by John with his help, and he helped create it. And it's a wonderful space that we use for events like this, student work, and so forth. So, John, thank you again so much for your support of the journalism program. Many of you may have not met our new dean, who's sitting right here. Stand up, take a bow. So I wanted to give a shout out and a thank you to Michael for his support and for helping us sustain this program with his ideas. He's only here, is it a couple of months? I don't know, time flies. It could be 3 years, right? How many months? August 1st. He came here. And he's been really in the trenches, and he's come at a pivotal time for journalism, as we all know. He's been calling out the misdeeds against the press that the current administration in Washington is so intent on destroying. We thought calling us the enemy of the people was harsh, but as Michael has said, and I'm going to quote him, "The work we do here at UC Berkeley Journalism is part of the bedrock of American democracy. As long as we do this work, there is hope. Hope that the voices of the overlooked will be heard. Hope that those who abuse power will be held to account. Hope that humanity will have better tomorrows." And so, thank you. Thank you, Michael, for having this voice right now. It's so important to the community and also to the faculty here and the students who want to be journalists. I'm unimportant. I'm just up here, Lou. There you go. Journalists are on the vanguard, but so are you. So are all of us, and we will continue to find strength and inspiration and resolve by standing up for democratic principles and standing up for the freedom of the press. In the end, we will prevail. And this is what Michael said, and thank you. We will prevail. So, yes, I'm Ken Light. Thank you, Lou. Yeah. So I like to say, is there a doctor in the house? Yes, he's sitting right here. Matthew Naythons, a medical doctor and a photographer, a publisher, and a friend. Tonight, he and I will look at his photographs, talk about the moments he captured. But let me give you some context. I'm a teacher, so it's really bad. I have to, teach. That's what they pay me for. The golden age of photojournalism is generally considered to be from the 1930s to the 1950s, a period marked by portable technology like the 35mm camera, flash bulbs. Some of you may remember burning your fingers on flash bulbs, leading to powerful photo essays in magazines like Life and capturing major world events from the Great Depression and World War II to social movements, establishing photography as a crucial storytelling medium. Publications like Life, Look, Parry Match, Picture Post championed the photo essay, using images to tell stories more powerfully than the text alone. For you young people, Life magazine had a weekly circulation of 6,700,000 copies a week, and that was actually subscribers who got the magazine. And all of you, there's a lot of older people here, so they probably remember Life. Maybe you were too cheap, you'd go to the doctor's office, there it would be. So the number of people who saw Life magazine was well beyond 6,700,000 copies. It outpaced their competition, and it's pretty amazing to think about it. Saturday Evening Post had a circulation of 6,300,000, and Look had a circulation of 6,320,000 in the second half of 1960. So it's pretty remarkable, and all these publications were photo-based. The era produced legendary photographers such as Robert Capa, Margaret Burke-White, Dorothy Lang, W. Eugene Smith, and locally we had some really amazing photographers in this era. We had Wayne Miller, whose actually work opened the gallery when we established the hallway gallery, Peter Stackpole, Hansel Meath, Nat Farbman, Fred Lyons, and John Zimmerman. And I know that John's daughter is here somewhere. Linda Zimmerman came up to be with us. She's all the way in the back. High circulation magazines created a massive audience eager for visual narratives, with photojournalism becoming a key window to the world. Life died in 1972, and most of the picture magazines had already disappeared. Despite this era saw a shift toward raw, subjective, and documentary styles. I believe we had a second golden age of photojournalism, which Matthew Naythons was part of. The 70s represented a transition where the medium of photography was redefined from simply capturing a decisive moment to more complex, artistic, and socially engaged forms of storytelling. While color was already used in advertising and magazines, it was considered amateurish for fine art or serious journalists until the mid-70s, specifically usually the credit goes to William Eggleston, who had the first color photography show at the Museum of Modern Art in 1976. But some of the comments during this time, black and white are the colors of photography, said Robert Frank. Color photography is vulgar, said Walker Evans. Ansel Adams weighed in on William Eggleston's photograph this way: if you can't make it good, make it red. And if you know William Eggleston's work, if you don't check it out, you'll see his photographs. But color became the new frontier, and photographs like Matthew's were expected to cover world events using Kodachrome and Ektachrome slide film, not an easy task to expose in a camera. USA Today was first introduced as a full-color national newspaper in 1982, and the New York Times first used color photography on its front page in October 16, 1997, making it one of the last American daily newspapers to adapt this feature. I think they liked the title Old Great Lady, and they didn't want to change, but they had to. Matthew was part of the second golden age. He had dual practice as a medical doctor and a photographer. He worked the ER here in the Bay Area and also began working as a photojournalist in the 1970s. During his photographic career, he founded an NGO and later became a publisher. After graduating from medical school in 1972, he went to California, where he completed a rotating internship at Highland Hospital in Oakland. At the end of his internship, he took 6 months off and moved to Amsterdam. In 1983, with help from a Dutch publisher and a friendly press card carrying photographer, he was able to get on an El Al flight from Amsterdam for journalists covering the Yom Kippur War, and so began a deep dive into working as a photojournalist, as if the emergency room didn't have enough action. I don't know. Highland Hospital? I don't know, dude. Friday night at Highland Hospital. So you had to travel around the world. So please welcome tonight Matthew Naythons.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for coming. I thank you for Ken, for John, for being here for this event.
Go ahead, hold it closer.
Hold it closer.
He's just a photographer.
I'm just a photographer. What do I know? Thank you for coming. Thank you for the support of the community here. It's a pleasure to be with Ken. And over to you, Coach.
Yeah, so we're going to look at Matthew's photographs. We're going to look at his life through photographs, all the events he attended and photographed and dodged bullets and somehow hopped on airplanes. And this is at his very, very beginning in 1963. Somehow he was able to swindle the Philadelphia Police Department to give him a press pass. What did you, like we like to say, a lot of chutzpah, right?
That's where the chutzpah began. I was in high school. I did a small story on a broken up still in Ballackinwood. Found a local newspaper who wanted to, weekly newspaper, who asked if they'd run the pictures. They didn't want to pay me, so I said, get me a Philadelphia Police press card. If nothing else, I thought it would get me in the press gate at the Philadelphia Phillies games. But out of that came this press card. I had no idea what that golden card would do.
And they are golden.
And it was golden.
Yeah.
That press card allowed me to get into the White House for JFK's funeral, but I'm getting ahead of your story.
No, you're not. There it is. How old were you when you did this?
I was 17. Kennedy was coming to Philly for a fundraiser in October, and I asked for permission to go, and Ben Kramer, who was called Uncle Ben, the head of the Mainline Chronicle, was a one-man show, somehow asked for permission. I went to the tarmac. I took the picture. A month later, when Kennedy was assassinated, I went down to pay my respects, as any good Democrat would from Philly. And I went to the White House. Already, as I walked from the station, Union Station, everything was in black bunting. I got to the gate in front of the White House, and there were people entering, and I said, "Who is that?" to the guard, who I've come to realize now was a Secret Service guy. And he said, "It's a journalist gate." And I thought,
I'm a journalist.
I had a tie and jacket on, I had a card in my pocket. And I said, "Well, surely I can get in." He said, "No, it's not that simple, kid." He said, "Go to a phone booth," pointed me to a phone booth, and he said, "Call the White House press room." I thought, well, whatever that is. And in the middle of the...
And no cell phones. You had a lot
no
of quarters.
Phone,
you had quarters and dimes.
Dimes.
In those days. Right,
I went to the payphone. I called the number he gave me. He said, "Call back in an hour." And I called back in an hour. He said, "You're in." And it wasn't until I did this book that I had a clue on what happened, which is that when I went in a pre-digital, pre-computer era, when I went and photographed Kennedy a month before, they must have run me through some clearance, and the name came up, and all of a sudden I was a member of the White House press corps.
Well, I want to
for a day.
I want to just briefly talk about this picture, because today it's very difficult to get close to the president. I mean, There's a very few number of photographers they allow close. We're talking about, a pool is what they call it, and maybe it's 8 photographers, and the rest of the photographers are held behind ropes. But this is a different era.
There may have been a pool, and if there was, I pushed through it.
Because you don't know how to swim, right?
I don't know how to swim. I mean, it was years later I read the famous Kappa quote, but I understood that intrinsically, that to get a good picture, you had to get close. So here I am as the caisson comes out from the North Portico. And I walked with the press corps, and there weren't very many people, down Pennsylvania Avenue. And to this day, I can hear the click-clack of the horses on the street and a silent crowd. And I still couldn't believe I was doing it.
And then you became this guy. What the hell happened?
Well, this was rock and roll. It was rock and roll. This was Amsterdam.
Amsterdam, right.
I graduated college. I finished my medical training. I finished my medical training in '72, and I went to Europe. The war was still on. I went with someone I met on down the houseboats in Sausalito, who had friends who were journalists. And when the war broke out in the Middle East, I thought, well, I'd been previously in Prague when the Russians invaded by pure chance. Maybe if I want to be a photojournalist, I should go to Israel. Well,
you're getting ahead of the pictures.
All right.
Yeah.
This was after I graduated college in '68. I went to on my trip through Europe. I went to meet my political science professor at Muhlenberg, and I got there the evening the Russians invaded. And in the morning of the 21st, I believe, of August, I went on to this. We heard the planes come in that midnight. Then someone ran in with a radio, and we heard what had happened, that the Soviets had invaded. Nobody slept. At first, and nobody in their right mind went out at night because we didn't know what was happening. In the morning, I went out at first light, joined a bunch of students, a group of students that were heading to the Central Committee headquarters of Dubček. And as we got closer, they ran into a line of of Russian soldiers with blue and white striped shirts. They're Marines that had flown in with the first planes. And as I was watching this, I heard the sound of automatic weapon fire. And I thought, well, they're shooting blanks. They weren't. And
what camera were you using? So you're using film. I mean, people in this
using
era,
film.
In this era, they don't quite understand. You don't put it on automatic. You have to have a light meter. You're using
light meter,
film, right?
Tri-X.
Yeah.
I
you
had
have one camera, two cameras?
I had one camera. I was off on vacation. I didn't consider myself a photographer.
50 millimeter lens?
That's probably a 50 millimeter. I'm sure I had one lens. It's a 50 millimeter lens.
Yeah.
And I then proceeded to take pictures of that morning, knowing I only had 3 rolls of film. And I had no idea what was coming down the road. Would it be a situation like in Hungary, where the whole city would go up in flames? So I carefully took my pictures. This is one of them.
And were they published anywhere, or was it just the start?
Published locally.
Locally.
I didn't know from syndication. I didn't, when I was taking pictures in Philadelphia, my mother took them to the drugstore. When I got on the train that took us from Prague to Paris, I didn't know what agencies were. I didn't know what syndication was. I didn't know where to get my film process.
That's because you were a doctor.
Because I wasn't a doctor yet. I was a medical student.
Okay.
But I learned very quickly about all of those things.
Hold it a little bit. No. Yeah, like that.
I learned all about that later.
You're just looking for trouble.
Where
is this?
I'd gone around the world. It was my graduation present the year after, or in '73. The war was over in Vietnam. I wasn't afraid of being drafted. So I just went around the world. I hitchhiked to Nepal. I went on the hippie trail. Losing my camera in a train in India, so I bought a new camera in Japan and had that new camera and film. When en route to the airport, I saw student demonstrations. And I took pictures. Tokyo. There was tear gas. This was the way these kids were avoiding tear gas. I thought that was pretty funny.
I think it's very funny. And then you started to work for magazines and become part of an agency. And
Well,
I love this very simple. I know this is in the book. The very simple picture of the Time magazine envelope, which people don't quite understand. When you were sent on assignment or you went somewhere to photograph, you'd throw your film in this little envelope and write your notes, and you'd either put it on an airplane or give it to someone and write a stewardess or a
believe
pilot,
it or not,
right?
we would take film in those envelopes to the airport, and we'd find someone going to New York, and we would say, "There's film in here for Time magazine. I think it was before X-rays. If it was, don't get an X-ray. Someone will meet you."
It was before X-rays.
Before X-rays, someone will meet you in New York and take the envelope. And they did it. We never lost film. I never lost film.
And it was before they said, "Did someone give you something?" Right?
Right. Absolutely.
You would have been screwed, Matthew.
It was so, I mean, there, in so many ways I can talk about what this was another world. It was so far ago, so many years ago. America was a different place. The world was a different place.
And I just like we throw this in because most people don't know what a contact sheet is. I mean, we do.
This
Oh no, this is an old crowd. Everyone knows, right?
this contact sheet, this gives me a moment to talk about where I learned about photography.
Yeah.
I went to Israel with that press card you saw, which was forged. And if you look at it carefully, you'll see where we poured coffee on it in order to change my picture and change the date. And I took that press card with me from somebody else in Amsterdam to Israel. I presented it to the press office. There was a long wait. And then they gave me my press credentials. And I would go out and take photographs. But every roll of film had to be processed and run by the censor. Because you could look at a photograph, and you can see where they cut an image out. You could look at a photograph and see, the censor told me this, and see behind it the hills, which in this case would tell the Syrian gunners where maybe they could drop a shell. But more than that, I mean, the education came in. Everybody had to sit in the Bet Sakharov, the press room, waiting to go to the censors. So I could sit with someone I had been in the field with and look at his film and look at my film, which is extraordinarily amateurish, and they had nothing else to do. So they'd be happy to tell me what they did, how they composed. That's where I got my education. And that contact strip came from those weeks. Crossing this is right after Sharon crossed the Suez Canal.
And you made friends with a lot of the photographers that were photographing.
I did.
I think Cornel Kappa was there, Micha Baram.
It was David Rubinger from Israel
yes.
was there. I knew Rubinger.
Yeah.
I met the photographers with SEPA Press, became instrumental in me becoming working with SEPA Press with Gokchen Sabahioklu. So I met the photographers in the field who were all very helpful.
I was going to say in those days they were very, very friendly.
Very friendly.
Yeah.
Very friendly.
Unlike today when they might walk right in front of you as you're taking a picture.
That I never experienced.
You're lucky.
That I've never experienced. We were here. Everyone was in the same boat. Nobody knew what was going to happen next in Israel in that period.
And where did you? How did you move into working for Time and connecting with agencies, and how did that happen? You're a young photographer,
I'm a young photographer.
and you're still working in the ER.
I'm still working in the ER. I'm still doing this. But it was in the Yom Kippur War where I met a photographer, David Graham Baker, who was working for SEPA Press. He was their person.
Do you want to tell them what SEPA Press is?
It was a photo agency based in Paris.
So in those days, there were a number of photo agencies, and they represented. Today, there's Getty is the big agency, but in those days, there were numerous photo agencies: Magnum, SEPA, Gamma, Liaison,
Sigma,
Black Star, and they represented photographers. And the photographers would send their film to the agency. The agency would then develop the film, and then they would sell it all over the world, literally.
Yeah, they were.
And then you'd get a cut.
And you get a cut.
50%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the way it worked for me, at least, was when I left, I stayed in Israel long enough to photograph Ben Gurion's funeral, and I promised David Graham Baker that on my way home, I had to go home. I had ears beckoned, that I would stop in Paris and see this guy called Gökçen Sabahayoglu, who was the man who ran SEPA Press. I loved him. He was a great guy. He had journalism in his blood. And he loved me. I was a perfect American photographer for him. I was a doctor. He didn't have to pay me advances. I'm serious. I mean, for Gökçen, it was a dream come true. This guy would shoot for Paris, and maybe he'd eventually get around to paying me. And it was the beginning of, as they say in Casablanca, of a great friendship. A great friendship. But the way it worked for me, Gökçen would get me an assignment, say for Time. I went to Vietnam for Time. And the film would go to Time. They'd process it. The agency would immediately pick it up. The deal with Time was they had rights in the United States, exclusive.
Right, first rights.
First rights. Everything else, where the agencies would take and distribute it around the world. So we made a little bit of money. It was all homeopathic money. We make a little bit of money from the Time assignment, and then whatever the agency sold.
Right, and publications would see Time magazine, and then they would want to buy it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, more than that, they were within hours of the film getting to Time, it'd be on its way to Paris, and they'd have it the next day.
They would send prints.
They would send prints.
Duplicate slides.
Prints or slides.
Yeah, no digital like today, where it goes electronically.
It's
very old school.
Very old school. They'd send prints, or they'd send the film.
Right.
The Time would keep some film for their photo library, and the rest would go to Paris.
And this photograph we're looking at now?
That was an assignment from Time for the floods in Honduras. And I just liked the picture. There's a Honduran flag up on the wall. These are French volunteers digging out after the flooding. Killed a lot of people. It was after, I forgot the name of the hurricane. Hurricane Fifi. That I never gave a shout out to my editor, my dear friend, Dawn Chegaby, who's sitting over there. This book would not have happened without Dawn. The person she's sitting next to, Bob Affeldosh, who was a designer, referred by Ken, made the book happen. And if I have any questions about where the picture was taken, who took it,
Ask Dawn.
Ask Dawn. The refrain was Ask Dawn. When she worked with me 20 years ago, the refrain was Ask Dawn and don't shout. Remember? Don't bellow. Don't bellow.
And you did a lot of, you did not only international, you did domestic stories like this one, The Running Fence.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Christo's Running Fence.
Christo's Running Fence in my backyard.
Yeah.
I did run across a photographer there who would stand in front of me. It was Gianfranco Gogoni. You remember Gianfranco?
Yes.
He was a competitive lad. And we both covered this. This is right before they did the final piece of fencing that went into the sea. I thought it was a great story.
And tell us about Vietnam.
I decided This was my war story that affected my war. I was skiing. I was skiing. I tell the story in my book. I was skiing in Steamboat Springs, and I
So close.
and I heard. Should I go? Shouldn't I go? Should I go? I was driving my friends crazy, who I had driven out from California with, and then I heard on the radio, waiting for the lift. It's one of those screen memories. I heard a reporter I knew from the Yom Kippur War reporting from the fall of Phnom Penh. And I said, that's it. I'm out of here. I was hoping my friends would say, oh, don't go. They were delighted to have me go. I gave them my keys to the car. I flew home, picked up a visa at the embassy, and took the first flight out I could get. And the assignment from Time came later from SEPA. I was going to do it on my own anyway. And I remember we had to change planes at, I think it was Guam, Pan Am. Last flight in, turned out, into Saigon. And I ran into Garrett Utley, who was leaving, who I had also known from the Yom Kippur War, who said, you're crazy. You don't know Vietnam. It's falling apart. This is not a good idea. And I remember turning around at night. All these things take place at night. And looking back at where I walked from the gate and thinking, maybe he's right. And then thinking, screw it. And I turned around and I walked to the plane.
Couldn't be any worse than the emergency room on Friday
Couldn't
night.
worse than the emergency
right?
Friday night. When I landed in Saigon, I said to the immigration guy, he said, how long are you going to be here? I said, oh, maybe a month or two. And he laughed at me. When he laughed at me, I realized this was clear. It was over.
Tell us about this moment. I mean, it's a very, very powerful photograph. I remember it was on the front page of, was it the French newspaper?
Francois.
Francois, yeah.
With a big headline, La Guerre est finie.
Yeah. Tell us how you got this picture, how you felt, your experience.
I had been in Vietnam only for about a week. I knew I needed my own story. And that evening, I was in the hotel, the Caravel, and there was a rocket attack on Saigon. I could see flames in the distance. And I asked the embassy crew that was going out if I could go with them. And they left without me. Not intentional. They didn't do it intentionally to screw me. They just wanted to get on the road. So I said, I'm going to go by myself.
What could happen, right?
What possibly could go wrong? So I had my cameras. I walked out of the Caravel, figuring I can just walk towards where the flames are. And I remember when the gate behind me cranked down, the gate that guarded the entrance, I thought, this might not have been the brightest move. So I started walking towards the fire, and I saw 3 or 4 guys in black pajamas with automatic weapons turn the corner and walk towards me. We didn't know. I mean, the Viet Cong were clearly in town. And I thought, well, there's certainly no point in running. So I put my hands up, and I walked slowly towards them. And it turns out they were a local guard on patrol. And I always carried cigarettes. I don't smoke. But I was sort of handing out cigarettes. Well,
that's because you're a doctor and
I'm
you're
a
going to get
doctor.
paid when they get sick, right?
Yeah, but I gave them the cigarettes, and they smiled, at which point a cop shows up on a Harley wearing a white, whatever you call these things, sash, full uniform boots. I gave him $20. I told him to take me to the fire. He drove me to the fire. It was an impossible walk. And when I got there, I couldn't find the NBC crew, and the crowd had clearly turned unfriendly. I think I took 1 or 2 pictures, and I thought, now what? And I turned around, and behind me was a sign on the door that said German Embassy. So I knocked on the door. Miraculously, it opened up. There was an older German guy with a World War II helmet on. I want to say his name was Hans. I think I'm making that up. But they had left him behind. And he opened the door. And I said, I'm an American journalist. I don't feel safe on the streets. Can I come in? And he said, "Kommen Sie in," or something like that, whatever. My German's, but he said, "Come in, come in, come in." And he shut the door. And he said, "The roof's there." So I walked up to the roof, and I was overlooking the fire. So I was tired. I put my head down on my camera bag. I fell asleep. I woke up at first light. I walked down, yelling out for this guy to leave the embassy. I couldn't find him, but like a good guest, I made sure the door locked behind me. And I walked out into that scene. And the area turned out to have been cordoned off by the police. But I was in the cordon, and I took this and a few other pictures right after the sun came up. And there was still smoking. Ah, thank you, Dawn. The cover of my book was taken from this scene of the fire from the rocket attack. This was taken from the roof of the embassy, looking down at the fire. And the other one, I think, was one of the few pictures I took on the ground, before I felt the mood change. And the mood was palpable when it changed.
And this is a slide.
This is something called a slide. And it's distributed.
Most of you probably still have carousels, right? Everyone remembers carousels, slide projectors?
This was stamped by SEPA Press, as you can see. This is an original. I think it's an original. And when I was assembling all my photographs, which had to come from a lot of places, and Dawn and Sarah, raise hand, came with me to Austin twice as we were going through files. So Sarah was sort of project managing and digitalize some of the work. But we went through all of this, and we found this in the files. And
So
we
these
took it
slides-
home. We took images of it.
So the film would go to SEPA. They would have the film developed. There were slides. They'd be put in plastic sleeves. They'd be edited, and then they would be sent to the magazines, and you can see all the stamps on them. People would write things on them, your name, and so forth. And it's crazy to think that stuff didn't get lost, that it's there.
Who knows what got lost?
Yeah.
But the sequence here was that when I came back after the fire, I hadn't slept that much, and when I was having breakfast, I ran into Michel Laurent, remember? Mm-hmm. And I was about ready to ship this film to New York, to Time magazine. And maybe, I don't think it went to Paris. I think it went straight to New York. And Michel Laurent asked me if I wanted to go up the road with him, up Route 1.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I'm going to go ship. And he was killed that afternoon.
Yeah. We lost a lot of photographers in Vietnam.
Had I thought the story was in Saigon. I knew the story was in Saigon, not up the road on another firefight.
And Vietnam falls apart.
Vietnam falls apart. I leave on one of the early helicopters. And in the helicopter, this was a small ship called the Blue Ridge. It wasn't a carrier. The pilots were coming with their families from Vietnam. And in order to make room for new helicopters, they would throw the old helicopters over the side. Some of the pilots, probably more attached to their helicopters, it was a calm day, jumped, and then they literally rode their helicopter down. They've been with this helicopter probably for a couple years. So they jumped off the helicopter, landed in the sea, and they were retrieved by the Navy. This one was obviously pushed over the side. These are Vietnamese refugees that have come from the ports, yelling to the soldiers, to the sailors, to take them aboard. They eventually were picked up by another ship called the Pioneer Commander. But here they are, they're just leaving, they're scared, and they're coming up alongside, they're coming alongside our boat, looking to get on board, but there was no room on the Blue Ridge. They were left to be picked up by other commercial boats.
So at this point, you're shooting both black and white and color. You have more than one camera now.
I have 2 cameras.
Only 2?
I have a Leica around my neck. I have 1 camera with a yellow sticker on it that's shooting black and white. Another camera with a red sticker on it that's shooting Kodachrome. Rene Barry taught me that trick.
It's a good trick.
It's a good trick. So I knew, but I would know what I was using, but I was still shooting. I preferred black and white, but sometimes color just cry it out at you. And a week later, some of those same refugees you saw in that photograph have been picked up by the Pioneer Commander and were coming to Guam. This is all they had. They weren't wearing shoes, some of them. He was carrying his Christ statue from home. I mean, and it was very moving. All of these stories are very moving. I'm being a bit more clinical when I tell the stories. But this is all very moving, you know. I mean, therefore but the grace of God, right? So this is the beginning of the wave of refugees that were welcomed, by the way, into the United States, that are now your doctors and your lawyers, your professors, the people on the street. They were welcomed into this country.
And you're still working as a doctor at this point and doing assignments and going back and working in the emergency room?
I'm very proud of myself that I covered the fall of Saigon between shifts in an ER. And I'm very proud of myself that in the years when I was doing this, I never stiffed the shift. I never missed the shift. I would arrange to have somebody cover for me, but I never missed the shift. No matter how tempting the story was. But in time, the assignments came more often, and the emergency room came less often.
Right, and it was a lot of organizing. You had to organize your equipment. You had to get plane tickets. You had to get visas and get on the plane. And
I got so good. I got so good at that. I could do it in my sleep. You know, bricks of film from gassers.
Right.
Coming back to Jeff Cimarelli, who cleaned my cameras. You know, somebody would take care of the dog. Well, I was married then, so my wife would take care of the dog, and I'd go off. But I could do it. It becomes second nature. Yeah. You do the same thing.
Yeah, and then people begin to tell the story of the war, and here's Francis Ford Coppola and his wife on the set of Apocalypse Now.
A friend of mine worked on the film. The company that was making it, I didn't realize, I'd forgotten, but I saw their contract, hired me to do some special photography. I did that a few times. I was there at a key moment in the film, by luck, and Francis was exhausted, and Ellie, the dear sweet Ellie, who just died. I love the smell. Thank you very much. The iconic scene with Robert Duvall. And we worked a long time to get the color right on this. I love the smell of it. Craig, oh right, there's Craig. Craig, raise your hand. Craig did the digital. When Ken and I talked about how you do this book, he said you got to have somebody who can work on the slides, who can do your work digitally, get the dust out, adjust the color. It's like, you know, burning in the black and white, and that's the guy. He saved a number of pictures, and we never manipulated. We just burned and dodged.
This is one of my favorite pictures. It reminds me of the movie Z, right? For those of you who remember that movie.
This was the trial of the Greek junta
Yeah.
in Athens in 1973. But that wasn't when I was in Israel. That wasn't part of the Israel trip. It was I guess I had gone back. And I went to go meet some friends of mine to go sailing, but I got a press card. Right? I always get press cards. And
how did you talk your way into this?
I don't remember. I just went to the whatever the ministry was in Athens, and I probably presented that forged press card, the one with the coffee on it. And by the way, there was more coffee.
Don't try that at home, right?
There was more coffee on the press card, but when I sent it they digitally cleaned it up. I was furious. But I went, I don't remember how I did it, but I went to someone in Athens, presented my credentials. They gave me a Greek press card. I heard this was happening. There was hardly any other journalists there, hardly any photographers there. But I recognized the moment. I saw Z. I recognized the moment. And Papadopoulos, the prime minister, and Ioannidis, the other member in the junta, were there. I have other pictures. We have one picture of them joking in the crowd, reading the newspaper, smoking. And I thought, well, they're just going to get a slap on the wrist. They died in prison 25 years later. Certainly, Papadopoulos refused to apologize for the treatment of the students and the torture and all of that. He took it. He went to the grave with that.
I like this picture, the power of this picture, because the soldier's just standing there, and you have no idea what's on the left, and the way he's standing, and everyone's watching him. It just has a powerful mystery to it, an intense mystery, a tortured mystery, and the facial, and the way it works, and that I think is a talent in a lot of your photographs.
Thank you. There was nobody else there. That was the thing that got me. This is a major trial. I've looked it up since online of the junta, and the Greeks weren't covering it, and the international press wasn't covering it, or if it was, they weren't there this day. We like red.
I like the photographer on the far right, stuck in the crowd. I think it looks like he's changing his lens. I'm not sure who that is.
Don, what do you remember about this picture?
This is in San Francisco, isn't it? In '76, the convention.
No, it wasn't. I had to drive to it. I don't think it was San Francisco.
Someone will Google it, I'm sure. Does it say? With the Reagan sign.
Right. Everybody was there for it, and one
Don't
person
steal
was
my
right.
sign.
A little bit of humor. You try to find, my God, you try to find humor in some of this. Try to find humor. This is the earthquake. In Salvador. Yeah. It could have been. It could have been Honduras. Could have been the after the floods in Honduras. And once again. You just see the mother's anguish in this simple hospital room where they're hanging a bottle of IV fluid. You don't see bottles anymore either. They're all bags. Anyway. This was American women in a Mexican prison. I had heard from someone on my dock. He knew a woman who was a mule, right? They're all from Southern California, these girls. And their boyfriend said, just go down to Bogota. It's cool. We'll have a nice vacation. We'll give you a suitcase, We're going to hide the cocaine. There's no risk. Okay? They got to Mexico City. Maybe they were tipped off by the DEA, but they fit a pattern. They were pretty. They were Americans. They were coming back from Bogota, and they went straight from there, from the airport to trial to Santa Marta prison. So
how did you get into the prison?
I talked my way in.
Talked your way in.
I talked my way in.
With that fake press pass, huh?
No fakery with this one. It was pure social engineering. I found the name of a woman who was the representative in the prison for the girls who got them conjugal visits with the men, and men worked for the government, worked for the prison. And I told her what I wanted to do, and I knew at that point nobody had ever gotten in. But I went, she said, come down and meet me in Mexico City. Let's talk about it. So I went down to Mexico City, and we talked about it, and I explained, I didn't have an assignment then. I was doing it for Liaison, my photo agency. And then the girls wanted to be exchanged for Mexican prisoners here, and had gotten nowhere. And I said, I think we can help them get out. We'll tell the story. It's one thing to talk about these women in prison, but it's another thing to show them. Let's show them. Let's see if we can help them with this prison exchange.
And then you did some work in South Africa.
Wait. Inexplicably, she let me in. She said, come with me on Easter Sunday. I'm alone, and you'll stay until I tell you it's time to leave. So I came back for Easter, and I got into the prison. I shot for maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, including kids outside, you'll see in the book, playing in a playhouse with bars on the window. And one of the mothers, not her, this is her cell, said, I want to go home before my kids realize that not all houses have bars on the walls. And I went back down after we syndicated it. It got a lot of play, maybe 8 months later, Dawn. And the prisoner exchange went through. They were getting on planes to serve their sentences in prisons near their home. And I went to college with a guy named Bill Otis. Bill was an FBI agent. We went to different roads. He was there for the prison exchange, and he said to me, nice work, Naythons. I said, thanks, Bill. I'll never forget that.
So you went to South Africa.
Went to South Africa.
Two pictures.
That's Zimbabwe.
Oh, Zimbabwe, okay.
I just went on safari, and I brought my cameras.
And then a story that really, I think, shocked the Bay Area.
It's gold miners.
A story that shocked the Bay Area was this story, People's Temple. And I know Greg Robertson was killed. He was working for the Chronicle or the Examiner?
Greg Robinson, I mentored Greg Robinson. He worked at Gasser's camera shop. When I would go and I'd buy my film and come back with stories, he was a wide-eyed kid. And I was supposed to be at his wedding. I wound up in Vietnam. And then, we'll get to that later. He was killed, he was murdered on the runway. Let me back up. I was supposed to have been on the trip with Ryan and Greg Robinson and Don Harris from San Francisco with the congressman. I had just come back from Paris. I was tired. I had talked my photo editor of Time. I convinced him, it took a lot of convincing that this was a story worth covering. Arnold Drafkin said, go.
Director of photography.
Director of photography said, all right, Matthew, if you really want to go, go. And then the Guyanese would not give me a visa. I knew that I certainly could have gotten in with the congressman, but I was tired and I thought, okay, I had to go down to Costa Rica to make a deal with the Sandinistas about coverage right out of network news. So I didn't go down to Guyana with them. And I was in Costa Rica when the news broke about this. And I immediately left via Panama to Guyana, to Georgetown. We went in at night. I still had no visa with a Learjet. The pilot said we couldn't raise the tower when we flew in. And the pilot said, I'll raise the tower. And they buzzed the tower maybe a couple 100 feet, and the lights went on, the lights on the airstrip went on. And he pulled in. I parked at the end of the airstrip. And I got out. He cut his engines. I got out. He caught me in my back and said, good luck. Took her up, turned around and took off. I mean, he wasn't there. He was in and out. I walked at night to the airport, to the immigration. They didn't care. They wanted to go back to sleep. They gave me my visa. And I was there at dawn the next morning, at first light. I went out with a commando group because that was looking for Jones in the jungle. And I stayed with them. And I went into Jonestown that night before there was a cordon around Jonestown. No journalists were allowed in. This was day 2. And when I got in at night, I got out of the helicopter with the commando team. The people on the people on the ground by the helicopter, these officers, assumed, of course, I was with the Army, and they let me in. They didn't, So I walked that night towards lights in the distance. There was lights on. I had no idea what was there. None. It was dead silence, no pun. The officers were walking around, some of them with their .45s in their hand, whispering to each other, howler monkeys in the distance. And I walked to the light, and when I got to the lights had been turned on in the main area, and I saw that. And I took my camera out of my camera bag. They recognized I was a photographer. They immediately arrested me. And they walked back to one of the cabins that the people had been living in. When I got there, it had already been ransacked by the Vietnamese army, looking for whatever they could find. Armies do that, right? And I ran into the coroner who had done autopsies on Jones and my friend and others who were killed on the airstrip, if you remember the story. And that's how I learned what happened to my friend Greg Robinson.
It was a very tough story.
Yeah, it was. Everyone says you would have been killed. Maybe, maybe not. I wasn't afraid of the jungle then. I knew what gunfire was by then. I like to think I would have gotten into the jungle. But if Greg had been hit, or Don Robbins, Don Harris had been hit, maybe I would have stayed with him. I have no idea. It's a tough story. This is the Thai-Cambodian border in 1978, 79, and Judith was there. The refugees were coming across. This is from Cambodia. These are a group of refugees coming out of Cambodia towards the Thai border, towards Khao Dang, a refugee camp that the established medical teams were on. The established medical teams would not cross into Cambodia without permission from the Cambodian government. It was just in their charters. I had walked in with my friend Rod Nordland, and I knew I could go in. I didn't care about borders. So I put together a medical team from California, and we just rolled. We made deals with the Thai military, and we rolled into Cambodia. And that's where that picture was taken, inside Cambodia.
And one of the big stories you did was Nicaragua. Here you are in the streets with Susan Marcellus, the Magnum photographer. I don't know. I've always wondered what you were talking about, Matthew.
Trying to stay alive, most likely. Seriously, because Susan would take enormous risks. Yeah. So we spent more time than we should with me telling her, Susan, you don't have to do that.
I'm just going to run through these pictures and one or two.
Sure. Susan Mazelis has a similar picture. We're standing right next to each other. The Red Cross in Nicaragua burned bodies for sanitation. This is a Sandinisto in the barricades.
And how long were you there in Nicaragua?
Off and on for a couple of years.
Yeah, it was a very big story.
This was a barber who was killed by crossfire. Just stuck his nose out. Sandinistas, after the government fell, coming in from the countryside to Managua. FSLN stands for Frente Sandinista Liberación Nacional. Right out of Under Fire, right? A sniper position in Leon, in Nicaragua. Sadat's home village, Mit Abu Kun. I went in. Hold on one second. I'll be quick. Okay. I went in. I was sailing in the Caribbean. I got in Caribbean, and off roads. I got in very quickly. First time person in. I knew I did not want to stay. As Dawn would say, I'd rather be pecked to death by small birds than go to the funeral with all the, with the zoo that would be. I heard that Sadat's home village was 50 miles away. We left at dawn, the day of the funeral, got there again before the police cordons went up, and I made these photographs. One of the many coups in Thailand, Bangkok. The effluent from a ruby mine in Thailand, the villagers would pan for rubies in the mud. Grenadian invasion. Hold on, go back one second. The crowd wants it. One day you're you're getting shot down in your helicopter. Next day, 4 or 5 days later, they're windsurfing by it. Support the Gainesville Revolution. Hunter Thompson and V.S. Naipaul. In a mini-moke. It was a glorified golf cart that Hunter rented. And I was traveling with him. And he drove the way we would expect Hunter Thompson to drive. And when we stopped for beer before I took this picture, Naipaul said, who had no idea who Thompson was. Thompson, of course, knew who Naipaul was. Might even been showing off more. Said, so Naipaul said, does he always drive that way? And I said, yes, he does. Go ahead, Ken.
My favorite picture.
Easter in Nicaragua. I went with the Pope to Poland. Solidarity. Okay, this is Under Fire.
The movie Under Fire.
The movie Under Fire. Gene Hackman playing the ABC correspondent who was murdered. Sort of based on that, Bill Stewart. We sort of try to tell that story. The thing on his chest is called the squib. It looks like blood. When he triggers it, it looks like he got shot in the chest. Bill Stewart was shot in the head.
The next one is a fun one. We love this picture, right?
What is it?
This is cocaine.
Jeff Cimarelli cleaned it out of my cameras. You remember Jeff, right?
Yes.
He cleaned it out of my cameras.
These are police officers.
They're Army. They're Army officers. And
tough job.
Tough
right?
job. I watched one guy go like this. I went down with another story. Training Salvadorian military. Elections, sorry?
What was the story of the man under the barbed wire?
He was training. They're firing. Well, I believe prior to that they were firing live rounds over the barbed wire, but from a fixed gun position. Unless you got up, which you couldn't do because you're under the barbed wire, you wouldn't get hurt. But he was scared.
This is the earthquake in Mexico. You have a series of photographs.
This
Mexico City.
hold that picture for a second. Go back. Well, I'll make it really quick. I know you guys want to go home. But she was crying. This is when you cross from being a photographer to part of the story a bit. She was on her knees crying in front of that mound. And I speak Spanish, so she said, my 19-year-old daughter had died in the earthquake, and there's nothing for her. So there was wood and cloth on the ground in the cemetery, and I made that cross, and I put it in the ground, and then afterward I held her. She, I later just figured out that the cross and the cloth was from graves that they had bulldozed to make room for more graves. Rajneesh Pur, Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, and his guards with an Uzi. AIDS quilt. I think that was Texas. San Quentin Prison. The Brooklyn Bridge? No.
Ask Dawn.
Dawn. We love this picture. So when you talk about light in dark places, there is light in this. And that's my dear buddy Rod Norland. My brother, the brother I never had, who died recently. In the old days when your passports expanded. ER. No, this is this is the Warrens. Who took this picture? Susan Weinecke. She did a story on me for People magazine and was with me when I was on the ward at Highland Hospital. Everybody takes a picture of themselves in mirrors, right? This was Warsaw. And there's the book. Before Ken cuts me off.
No, we're going to have some questions.
Oh, questions. Then I have something to say.
Of course.
Questions?
Questions?
Bring a mic to you.
There's a mic going around.
Yeah.
With all the uncertainty you have in the various places you went about what was going to happen and how you would get out, how did you manage to have a regular schedule at Highland?
That's a very good question. When I went off on a long story like Vietnam, I took a month off because I knew that would happen. And the other stories, I would schedule around things I knew about. The Yom Kippur War, Prague, that was all on vacation. It was the smaller stories I did, Evel Knievel, for instance, that I could schedule between ERs. The big stories took a lot more work, but I did it. Nadine Foreman was the medical director at Highland then.
Oh, thanks. So you spent a lot of time out of the country telling stories with your camera about what was going on someplace out of the country. And I'm just wondering, whose pictures might you have been looking at or aware of that were showing what was going on in the country while you were out of the country?
You mean what was going on in America?
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't think that way. I looked at photographs from the photographers of the era Ken talked about, as sort of the sort of work they did. But when I was out of the country, I was out of the country.
Well, Matthew, thank you for a brilliant body of work. I want to ask a sort of an awkward question. You took pictures of a great number of people who were in need of medical aid, and you're a doctor, and I wonder how you reconcile the two duties.
That is a very good question. The people who were in most need of, a doctor without any equipment can do very little, particularly around high velocity rounds. And we skimmed by the picture of the people being burned in Nicaragua. But when I was in Nicaragua, I said to myself, if there was ever an occasion that I could actually do something, give something back, because really, even with a stocking chest wound, what are you going to do? I would do it. Whenever the opportunity arose, I would do something. Months later, that opportunity came to me on the Thai-Cambodian border. When I saw those people coming across, skeletal in the early days, I said, well, this is my, and then I walked into Cambodia with Rod Nordland without any permission at all, and saw more refugees that were not coming into the border area. I realized I could do something. I could put a medical team together, raise money, go back, and go into the Cambodian area where nobody was, where very few people. And I did that. We pulled it off, again, with luck, money. Joe Baez donated money. Stan Atkinson, who was a news guy in Sacramento, raised money. Harvey Glasser, was a doctor here, put on the back end of the operation. And a team of American doctors, nurses, and techs joined me. And we, within a very short time, with permission of the Thai Supreme Command, we were rolling across the border. So I did what I could do at the time. And what equipment we didn't get, we couldn't purchase. We had friends in the Red Cross who were more than happy to pass it out the back window at night from their storerooms. I mean, believe me, when people were, I saw more people I could do nothing about because they were pretty close to being dead. Does that answer your question? I think actually that part is the better part of my resume of when I did that. It was really a way to give back.
Hi. You tended to run towards the chaos when something happened. Did you ever find yourself in a situation where you're like, I can't take a photo of what I'm witnessing right now?
No. I'm very sensitive. I was always sensitive. Well, I shouldn't say no. I was sensitive to the people around me. I wasn't sure that I wanted a picture of the woman who I made the cross for, because that was just a gift. But I asked her. And I would just, I would try to, there were pictures I didn't take when people were, obviously didn't want their picture taken. I mean, not just this, but where the feeling was, leave me alone. And I'd leave them alone, particularly being in the developing world, being a white guy with a camera. I was very sensitive to white privilege, what we now call white privilege, that I had to be very careful where I was, what I was doing, and respecting where they were, whether I can go into their house and things like that. It's changed now. There are a lot of, as you pointed out, as Ken said to me earlier, now they're local photographers with real cameras, in addition to people with cell cameras. But I can't give I can think, but I can't give a specific incident where I turned away. I mean, I would have turned away before I got to that situation.
Oh, sorry, just wait for the mic.
So the Bay Area actually organized and supported a whole ward in Cowee-Dong. And Joan Baez's mom worked on the ward with me.
We were there. We eventually went into Cowee-Dong when we couldn't go on the border anymore. At one point, the population on the border that we had photographed. Oh, hi, David.
So also, I mean, Matthew's, unless you have support, you can do a little bit of first aid, but you can't really do much.
How long have you been sitting there?
2 days, 3 days waiting for you.
I don't understand how I stay the same and he's gotten older. How did that happen? Well, yeah, as David said, a fellow doc,
And photographer.
and a very good photographer. What can you do? I mean, even when we went into the remote Thai villages, which we did when we weren't in Galidong, as part of the deal that I made with the Thai military to give us access into Cambodia, I said, we go out into their villages. Well, what could you do, really? You tell them to dig their latrines further away from the water supply. And you treat a lot of skin infections and ears, but, not the critical things that come in through war. But you can, pass. When I went into Cambodia, I watched a medic in Mak Moon take crystalline penicillin and pour it into somebody's wound. No. He didn't know. It was. You could take barefoot doctor glove only so far, and that's when I said we got to bring in medical teams. We got to bring in medical teams, and it was a challenge. It was a challenge. A lot of bureaucracy. Remember Nipponic? He was a great guy. It helped us along. Yeah, John.
I'm curious, what are you shooting these days?
Sunsets
With your cell phone.
with my cell phone. You can get. It's all about composition, right? So I can get very creative with my friends and sunsets and.
In the last year, working on this book, a lot of
And
editing,
last year, working on this,
selecting, choosing, sequencing.
you can take good pictures with an iPhone if you compose. If you keep your fingers off the lens, you really can. It's a legitimate. I mean, everything's changed. You saw slides. You've seen contract strips. You've seen envelopes for shipping film. Well, we've got this. And, it's better than poking the eye with a sharp stick.
I admire your work, and I'm so grateful for all these images.
Where are you?
I'm right over here.
Oh, hi.
Hi. So thank you so much for all your work. I am curious how you feel about any shift or the power of photography now compared to, what you did decades ago.
There's so enormous power in a single image or images. We saw that in Minneapolis. We saw that clearly in Minneapolis. We saw that with a little boy in his backpack and his bunny hat. I think it was a bunny hat. That's a single image. They can say what they want about it. They can lie through their teeth. They can have no shame. But single images, photography exists and still will have power. They can manipulate. They can put AI pictures up. But there are still enough of us, I hope, who can hold power to account. And images, but I fully believe that there's a purpose for photography. It's not the way I did it. That world's gone, but there are people who are taking pictures and bringing them to life, and they're still pictures. No, they're still pictures, but they remain pictures. Does that answer your question? I mean, look, I can talk about AI. I can put Fred Richens' hat on. It was here recently. We know you can manipulate it. What made it work in Minneapolis, where they couldn't say it was AI because there were witnesses. There were witnesses, many witnesses. They couldn't lie their way through this one. In the back rooms at night, dark, there are no body cameras. We're at the mercy of forces. I don't know where they're going, but we're certainly at their mercy.
Wow. Boy. Okay, so that's a tough question to follow. Great question. But Ken, you brought this up, and Matthew, I hope you'll follow up. What was going on when you started shooting color? You're in the field already.
You know, it was, the transition was subtle to me. I mean, I had a camera with red tape on the top. I knew it was my color camera. I didn't think much about it. I never worked in the darkroom. I missed that part of my life. Only now can I look at my work. Remember, when we were shooting with film, we should point this out, we didn't know whether the camera worked. We were taking enormous risks, some more enormous than others, but we were taking risks. We didn't know if the camera was working, and we wouldn't know until the film got to either New York or Paris, and they developed it. Because mechanical cameras are probably more reliable than digital cameras, but we didn't know what we'd find. And there was always, in the back of your head, so another reason I would shoot more than one camera.
Yeah, I was going to say there was always the fear that the editors would see your out of focus pictures, the picture when the shutter went off and got your shoe, right?
Right.
And then you didn't edit. I mean, you had
We
the
didn't
editors.
edit.
The film just went there, and they chose. And sometimes the photographers didn't know for a year what they had seen, because they were busy working, roaming around.
Right. That's more the geographic guys
Well,
who didn't come home.
they didn't come home. And you didn't necessarily learn how to edit. Other people were editing.
I didn't learn how to edit. I didn't learn how to edit until Dawn and I produced books for my company called Epicenter Communications. And we packaged books of other photographers, and we had edit sessions, very good edit sessions, with some of the best editors in the country, or some even came from overseas. We put them up, we fed them, we had big projection sessions in the evening, and I learned how to edit. Before that, I didn't know.
Right here.
Hi, I'm over here. And I got a question for you, Matthew. Thank you for being here and sharing. My question is, my understanding of photojournalism is the photographer tried to get as close as to the place where actions happen, such as conflict, war, protest, and whatever. And my question for you is, how do you balance that desire to come close to the action and also your own limitations such as safety, if you ever think about that? And also, how do you stay safe?
I'm a great risk taker. I'm an enormous hedger. I learned very early on in my life that I had a good street sense. I have no idea why I have a good street sense. I was a Jewish kid from middle-class Philadelphia. Why should I have street sense? But I did. I learned it for the first time in Prague in one incident. And it stayed with me. So I could read a street. I could, for myself, decide how close I could get before it wasn't safe. It's what happened in Saigon. I got close, and then I sensed a mood change, and I went into the German embassy. So that repeated itself pretty much throughout the time I was taking pictures. I was also very lucky. Never underestimate the power of luck. But, the luck came also with me watching a road. I could watch a road. An example, I had to cross a road out of Esteli with a number of journalists. We had come in at night, come in during the day. The National Guard had been under attack by the Sandinistas. We thought the Sandinistas controlled the town. We parked on one side of a four-lane highway, crossed into the town. And then when it came time to leave, there's very quiet. And I didn't like the road. I always carried a pair of binoculars in my, fishing vest. And something was wrong. So we had to cross the road to get to our car. So I looked down the road And the road so it was like this. There was a road and then it dipped. And I could see just in the dip, their turret of a machine gun on the tank. And I was with Almaguio Beretta on this one. And I said, we're not leaving here until that's gone. So we crossed the night. They had gone back to the quartel. And that was just, even paranoids have enemies, right? That was me being very careful. And I just didn't feel right. You've had that, haven't you, Ken?
Not machine guns, but yes.
Well, you feel that.
Yes, you have a sense it's safe or it's not safe, or you check, and it's definitely a feeling.
It's definitely, and
there is luck.
And there's luck.
Yeah.
I mean, they say in sailing, the most dangerous thing you can have on a sailboat's a calendar, right?
I thought it was a six-pack of beer.
That, in other words, you had to be somewhere the next day, so you would take risks. And it's the same in where we were. The most dangerous thing you had sometimes was a deadline. And if and maybe you don't want to make that deadline if you think it's risk-reward. You do your best to balance risk-reward. And believe me, I know better than anyone else what a high-velocity round would do to flesh. When I think back on it, talking to my sailors as well, I think at times, what on earth was I doing? What on earth was I doing?
Well, thank you very much for being here, Matthew.
One word.
One more word.
One word. The book has essays. The book has essays by Judith Thurman, John Lee Anderson, and something I've written. This book has to be read. If you want to buy the book, you should read the book. I have many photography books at home. I've read some. Most I haven't really read carefully. This book, the writing by Anderson and Judith, are just brilliant. I recommend it.
And they're going to be selling books outside, and Matthew will be there to sign them. And thank you all for coming and joining us tonight. And
thank you, friends, for coming. Thank you for supporting Mr. Light.
Our next event is the PhotoVision Lecture Series with